Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter. Of course, you can subscribe to the channel. Let's talk boxing. Let's talk about Makabu and Mchunu and what we learned from this fight with regards to a potential fight against Canelo Alvarez for Ilunga Makabu. I thought it was a very close fight. Online, a lot of people felt that it was a robbery. On social media, they felt that Mchunu definitely won the fight and that Makabu was essentially gifted the win. I had it 7 rounds to 5 to Mchunu, so I thought it was close. I thought early on in the fight it was actually Makabu winning the fight. I thought he was having a lot of success with the body work. He was landing this wide looping left hook to the body. He was also throwing these sort of shovel hooks, stroke uppercuts, quite low, sort of almost by the belly button underneath the guard of Mchunu, and he was having a lot of success landing those. When he was framing, he was using his arm to push down on the head of Mchunu and working off of that. He had success, but that was done rarely, to be honest with you. It should have been used a lot more frequently. Early in the fight, he was warned about it, so I'm not sure if that put him off. You had on the commentary team Ray Boom Boom Mancini, and he felt that Mchunu should have stayed in the pocket. I couldn't personally disagree more. I thought when they were in the pocket, Makabu was doing very well. From the 6th round onwards, what you started to see is a distance open up between the two. When you get Makabu rotating, his feet are so bad. They're some of the worst feet I've ever seen for a world champion. His feet are so bad that he struggles to rotate and adjust and turn with you when you keep him moving. So a gap was opening up. And when that gap was opening up and Makabu was trying to walk his way in, Mchunu was leaping in with this leaping right hook, and he couldn't miss with it. Now, you can't directly compare Mchunu to Canelo Alvarez, of course, because Mchunu is the thicker set man. He's a different style of build in that regard. He's a bigger man, although Canelo is very stocky for his weight division. But also he's a southpaw, and so the angles of the punches are completely different. That leading right hook that lands for Mchunu doesn't mean a right hook is going to land for Canelo Alvarez, and the leaping left hook comes over the other shoulder, so it's a different type of thing, right? Nonetheless, there are certain things you can pick up on it, and that is the poor reflexes of Makabu. He would just be walking in and he could not adjust. He couldn't read or even adjust to the leaping power shots of Mchunu. Even when it was quite obvious, he'd be backing out and fall into that crouch, ready to leap forward. Makabu was unable to deal with it. Now, here's the thing. A lot of people feel now that Canelo Alvarez obviously walks through Makabu. They feel it's a complete mismatch. From a perspective of skill set, I would agree. Canelo Alvarez is vastly superior. But we cannot ignore, in my humble opinion, the physical differences. And I do believe there are physical differences here. Can Canelo Alvarez absorb the sort of punishment that Makabu can dish out and was dishing out to Mchunu? This guy is a puncher at cruiserweight. Okay, those shots to the body early on, they could be affecting Canelo Alvarez a lot more. That framing, when he's trying to affect the bodily construct of Canelo Alvarez, it's going to be harder to do that to Mchunu, who's physically bigger, stronger, thicker set than it is to somebody like Canelo Alvarez. Not many people get inside on Canelo and work his body by manipulating his body, really getting up close. Billy Joe Saunders actually had a little bit of success when he did it, and at one point he caught Canelo with a big left hook off of that break when they were on the inside. So Canelo Alvarez is quite used to walking guys down, making them fear him, backtrack, and he's the hunter. When he's the hunted, we know that he's got great upper body movement, but you also see that Canelo Alvarez tends to take periods off in rounds. Okay, he has certain stamina issues, there's no doubt about it. We even saw it against Caleb Plant. And unlike Makabu, Caleb Plant is not a guy who was really putting it on him and wearing him down. So what would happen is, I think it was round 9, he backed off onto the ropes, and he's sort of changing the height dynamic, showing different angles, threatening with feints, and Caleb Plant's scared to just walk in. And so he bought himself a good 30-40 seconds to take a breather. Makabu has to take that luxury away from him. He has to walk forward and start to work like he did early on. Now, he started to seem to tire from round 6 onwards, and so he wasn't closing that range as consistently. Perhaps he also felt Mchunu's power, and as a result, he wanted to sort of feint his way in rather than just walk in and close the range behind that jab against Mchunu. And so as a result, it gave Mchunu some space. Personally, I don't believe he should be doing that against Canelo Alvarez. He has to maintain that high tempo. Work your way in behind the jab. He had a lot of success with the jab early on in this fight. It's naturally heavy, so he doesn't even have to shoot it, in this big, powerful manner. Just flick it out there with the weight of your natural arm as you close the range. Punch with Canelo Alvarez if you're able to, rather than commit behind. He has this tendency when a guy's moving backwards, he'll tend to overreach to get to them. If you're leading in that manner and you're overreaching because you can't get to your opponent backing up, and your weight is going beyond your lead foot, you're begging to get countered, especially against a guy as slick with his upper body movement and as sharp with his counter punching as Canelo Alvarez. So he has to be more cautious but consistent with the foot pressure and focus early on landing merely to the body. What you don't want to see is what he was doing against Mchunu in the latter half of the fight, in the sort of middle to late rounds, whereby he's walking in tentatively and he's enabling Mchunu to maintain that range in a comfortable manner and then leap in with shots when he wants to leap in. No, you make Canelo Alvarez work. When you're ripping those shots to the body or you're ripping those shots over the top, at times, try and grab his arms, get those underhooks in, lean on him, push him back, do some wrestling training to bring this to the fore. Make him carry your weight, okay? Make this guy work, rip those lungs, lean on him, make him work, and eventually if he becomes a sitting target, Canelo Alvarez, in the latter half of the fight, you could see Makabu do something that he's very good at doing actually, and that is when he's behind on the scorecards, he will find a way to find a big shot to turn the fight around, because he is a puncher, like I said, even at cruiserweight. Now, we've seen him in against some big punchers at cruiserweight, and he's not really affected. Even last night, he was caught with a massive right hook, and he ate it flush, and his head spun. I think this was like in the 6th or something like that. You saw beads of sweat fly off his head. His legs didn't rock. Now, there are times that his balance is so bad, and we'll get to that in a minute, he'll readjust his footing, and he looks like he's a little bit shaky. That's not him being hurt. What that is his poor balance and him having to readjust his feet, because he'll put that lead foot forward, follow up with the back foot, and if his feet are too close together when you hit him, he has to readjust his feet, and he does this little wobble, and it looks like, oh my word, has Makabu been hurt? He actually hasn't been hurt. You could see he hasn't been hurt. His knees are fine, his legs are fine, his head's fine, he's lucid, he's throwing a punch immediately afterwards. So Canelo Alvarez is going to want to get on the back foot, lure him in, get him rotating. When that lead foot lands and then he's trying to come in closer with that second foot, lead with your own power shots. That will keep him off balance. As he's reaching into you with your upper body movement, don't be afraid to lean back and come back with a counter shot to the body. Use misdirection and sometimes throw that left hook upstairs. In terms of a skill set like that, in terms of if this was a sparring session with big gloves on and big headgear, you can imagine Canelo looking sensational at points. But over a 12-round fight, let's say I'm invited tomorrow, they call me tomorrow, Chris Andre, I want you to be part of Canelo Alvarez's team, performance analyst, help us come up with a game plan. I would be confident that Canelo Alvarez can potentially beat Ilunga Makabu. If he wasn't, I was to say, listen, he lost because he was up against the bigger man. Whereas if I was called up by Makabu's team and they said to me, listen, we want you to come up with a game plan, beat Canelo Alvarez. If Makabu does not beat Canelo Alvarez, I'll be fuming. And I see that as a difference, right? Because the physical discrepancy, in my opinion, is quite big. And so if he gets his tactics right and he is to stay close, he has to get, and I know it's easier said than done when your feet aren't great, but Canelo Alvarez, like I said, is not really a mover like that. Yes, he's got great upper body movement, but in terms of his feet, he's not really a guy that's going to bounce on his toes, pump out a jab and rotate around the ring. He's going to evade the first phase attack, maybe even the second phase attack, and then counter you or pivot out. He's not a guy that's going to sit there and get on his toes and move around the ring. You can get close to Canelo Alvarez. Use your physicality, get close, and stay close. That's the key for Ilunga Makabu. The only acceptable way Makabu would lose this fight, in my humble opinion, is if he was to walk onto a shot because he's trying to pressure him, in the way, say, Derek Chisora walked onto a David Hayes big shots when those two fought, because he was taking too many risks in trying to close the range. If that happened early on, I'd understand, right? You walked onto a big shot. Even then, however, David Hay at heavyweight was a bigger pound-for-pound puncher than Canelo Alvarez is going to be at cruiserweight. I promise you that, right? Canelo Alvarez went the distance with a very seriously drained Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. He went 11 rounds with Caleb Plant, right? Billy Joe Saunders, up until the shot that literally broke his face, right? He didn't look like he was in trouble. You didn't see him getting wobbled or anything like that. That was an individual shot which broke a bone. Had that not happened, you weren't seeing Billy Joe Saunders getting bashed all over the ring and unable to deal with the power of Canelo Alvarez, right? Like I said, Makabu is able to take the power of cruiserweights. So to me, if he gets his tactics right, he would be very disappointed if he was to lose the fight. That's how I see it. But I wouldn't be surprised if he was to lose the fight, on points in particular, because he has that thing, like I said, of this poor balance whereby you hit him and he has to readjust his feet. Now, when the crowd are roaring, and he's landed a short little hook, has Canelo Alvarez, who's lured him into a shot, or he's landed an over the top right hand, and it lands flush on the forehead of Makabu. Even if he's lucid, just having to readjust his feet, and then Canelo Alvarez steps around him and he tries to turn with him, and he's going to look clunky and clumsy. The crowd are going to be roaring, and the judges are going to think, wow, Makabu just got wobbled. So I can see how Canelo Alvarez would win the fight on the judges' scorecards, right? But in real terms, is Canelo really going to walk in there and bash this guy up? I'm not so sure. I can't see it when he's been in there with big punching cruiserweights. Kudrayashev, Papin, he's been in there with guys that can bang. Mchunu has landed some big shots and he's a natural cruiserweight, small, stocky guy, but he's thicker set than Canelo. Go and look at the photo when Canelo is hugging Makabu. You can see the size difference, right? But like I said, the question is more about what can Canelo Alvarez absorb rather than the power, right? Because you can be a middleweight and carry the power that could hurt a cruiserweight. But what can he absorb in return? Because Makabu can dish out some punishment. And Canelo might not be as durable as Mchunu, right? Let me know what you think about this. Is this the foregone conclusion that a lot of people feel that it is? The one key area that I have to mention, because it's key. If they do drain him down to 190 pounds, this is Makabu. I know he's not a big cruiserweight, but he hasn't made 190 or anywhere near to that in a very long time. If they drain him down to that, and then additionally to that in particular, they have a rehydration clause, which is something Canelo Alvarez isn't averse to doing, then you're ultimately fighting a weakened version of Makabu, who clearly seemed to have stamina issues last night, in my humble opinion. What sort of guy is going to turn up? You have cerebral spinal fluids when you're talking about being dehydrated that are taken away from that area, which provides less of a cushion for the brain, so you become more susceptible to power punches. It's essentially a fight that I wouldn't want to see if that's the case. If you want to be great, like you're saying, you want to achieve greatness, then beat the guy when he's healthy, right? Fight him as a cruiserweight, you know. But if you see Makabu drained and you have this rehydration clause, then obviously my prediction could change considerably. And I'm not saying it is a prediction that Makabu would knock him out. I could certainly see a manner in which he loses the fight. But if I'm in Makabu's corner, I believe we could get the right tactic, so to speak, where he should be the favourite against Canelo Alvarez, even though it wouldn't look pretty. It would have to be an ugly fight, a lot of leaning, a lot of short shots, cupping shots, wide hooks to the body and even to the hips. You know, wear him down, stop him from being mobile, and then from there, try and take him out late on in the fight. That's how I would approach it if I was in Team Makabu. Let me know what you thought last night of last night's fight. Even if you did think Mchunu won the fight like I did, do you understand why I believe that there's a difference in what potentially Mchunu can absorb compared to Canelo, and why that wouldn't necessarily affect my prediction? I know most people feel that Canelo Alvarez wins this fight. If you do feel that he knocks Makabu out, please explain why you feel that, when he isn't knocking everybody out who's a lot smaller than Makabu, and Makabu isn't a glass-jawed guy who does compete against people that punch a lot harder than Canelo. Make your case for it. Do you think it is because he will be walking onto shots, and as a result of that, those shots will be magnified in power because he isn't the hardest to lead off on, as you saw tonight? Let me know what you think, everyone. Thanks for watching. Chat to you soon. Take care. God bless.